Friday to you. So today we have executive producer Athena Peters from Turbine, and she is here to tell you about what she does at Turbine and to also educate you on how you too can become a great producer, or in that just general sense, great employee when it comes to working in the game industry. So I will turn it over to Athena and let her do the rest of the introduction. Welcome.
Okay. So just a forewarning, I'll jump into the slide deck in a little bit, but I tend to be an agile person in general, so I made this slide deck like 2 days ago, and just talking to your faculty this morning, there might be a couple of things I want to throw in that aren't up on this deck. So if I kind of go off the rails, just I'm being agile. That's what we do, right? We adjust. So who am I? My name is Athena Z Peters. I am the executive producer of Lord of the Rings Online, which is part of WB Games, specifically the Turbine studio, which is located just outside of Boston. And I've been in the games industry for about 12 years. I think I did the math on that right. I think this might be off a little bit. It might be a little longer than that. And the disclaimer that I have to put up there, I am not here officially as representative of WB Games. This was not an approved talk by them, so anything stated in this talk is actually an opinion of mine and not a company stated or a reflection of WB Games in general. So that's who I am. So we'll go ahead and start off with the many, many jobs that I have done over my entire life. And so I've been a designer, I've been a producer, I've been a lifeguard, I am a mom, I am an entrepreneur, I was an actor, I was a director, I was a waitress, a babysitter, I worked in quality assurance, I am a costumer, I am a LARPer, and I was also a dog trainer for a long time. How many of those jobs actually apply to the production job that I do now? All of them. 100% of those jobs are applicable to what I do right now and what I intend to continue doing for the rest of my life. So any of you who are sitting there right now thinking that whatever job you're doing doesn't apply to what you want to do in the future, I challenge you to figure out how it does, because everything applies. You can always learn something from what you're doing right now and apply it to what you want to be then. So the 4 components of being a producer and how these jobs over the years have applied. So a producer takes on a lot of different things. And you'll find as you go through the ranks after you start joining game companies, for one, what a producer is, or even if they call it a producer in various studios you might work for, it could be widely different. But mainly, the main things that you're looking at is organization, people skills, business, and creativity. You need to have all of these things to do that job. Now, right now, you might only have one of those skill sets. Or maybe you have 2 of them. And there might be that you have all 4 of these, but you're only strong in one or the other. What I would suggest is find out what is the thing that you are strongest at, focus on that, sell that, and sell it hard while you work on the other skills. Because one of the things about becoming a producer, or even at the point at which I'm at an executive producer, is that at some point you're going to be in charge of a team of a wide variety of creative individuals, and you need to have some understanding of how they got to where they are and what they're doing every day, that it's very important for you to spend the time doing all of the jobs that surround it, or at least having some understanding of all of those jobs so that you can communicate with them, so that you can help them schedule, so that you can understand where their skill sets are strongest, so that you can help them do their best work. So when I entered the game industry actually as an actress. So my first games job was to be an improv actor for a live events team for a game called Shadowbane. I'd already known that I didn't want to continue to do theater for the rest of my life, so I wanted a grown-up job, and I decided that game design was a grown-up job, or at least as grown-up as I'm ever going to get. So I decided to just start stalking every game company that was in my town, which at that time was Austin, Texas, and just looking for any opportunities to get into what they did. In the meantime, I guess I missed this job over here. In the meantime, I actually went and took a job selling computers at Dell because I knew nearly nothing about computers. And I figured that was something that a computer game designer should know something about. So the great thing about selling computers at Dell is that they put you through a 2-week crash course in how hardware is put together on a computer. So I decided to go work for them so that I could get this free crash course in how to put a computer together. Before that, I had taken a couple of very basic programming courses in high school. So I took Pascal. Pascal is the one coding language I know. Unfortunately, nobody uses it anymore. And I don't actually know it anymore either. But that was the one. I did have about a year of that, and then I learned how to put a computer together. My first computer was actually because I decided I wanted to play this game called EverQuest, which is one of the very first MMOs out there. I did not own my own personal computer at that time. I was about 19. So I went to Best Buy. I picked up the box of EverQuest off the shelf. I walked over to the computer people and I said, give me a computer that'll do this. And I got one, and that's how I learned about computers. So between that and my job at Dell selling computers, I got myself some very basic understanding of how computers worked. And then I started stalking all those game companies that were in Austin, trying to find a way for my skill set to fit into what they did. And at that point, my skill set was performing, was acting. I could come up with stories on the fly if I needed to. And I was hoping that somebody wanted to let me tell stories in their game. So I lucked out that one day on the forums for Shadowbane, they posted, we need actors. And it was like a perfect opportunity for me to jump in and say, well, that's what I do. So that's how I joined the team. So I spent hours and hours working nonstop. So I was at Dell at 8 a.m. in the morning, and I would leave Dell at 6 p.m., go straight to Wolfpack Studios, and work there until about 2 or 3 in the morning doing live events, then wake up and go do it all over again. And that lasted about 4 or 5 months until Wolfpack Studios was able to give me more than just the very bare minimum of part-time work so that I could actually support myself doing just that. But at that point, I had to pick up extra work. They couldn't just pay me full-time to do live events and just make up stories on the fly with players in the game. I had to do something else. So I had to find another skill that I was good at. So that became my people skills. Oh, I didn't put community in here. That's so funny. So the other thing that I was really good at was assessing the community, listening to them about the things they were having problems with, putting their way of communicating that into a format that the actual leaders of the company understood. Because a lot of times when players complain about things, they can use a lot of harsh language, or they're thinking about it as a player, and trying to then translate that into the owner of a business is not always a two-way, right? It's not always a direct correlation. Owner of a business might read that and just be like, all I see is people complaining. I don't know why they're complaining. I just know they're complaining. So I found that my skill was translating what the players were saying into something that the owners of the company could understand and could actually act on. So my other part of my job was, when I wasn't in making up stories with the rest of the players, I was on their forums, or I was listening in in-game chat to the things they were complaining about and making a large document every day about the main topics that they were concerned with. And if possible, actually going in and reproducing those issues, making step-to-step descriptions of the problem, and sending those to the programmers, which is how I got into QA, which is over here somewhere, I thought. Oh, there it is, up there in organization. That's where I picked up organization. I am not a naturally organized person. I had to learn that skill. I've been, as we've already established, my role into this was from the theater. I'm a very creative person, and that means most of the time my life is a lot of chaos. Don't try to make any sense of my desk if you come to it, but believe me, I know what's on that desk and where it belongs. But in order to communicate to the developers that I was working with, I had to find a way to break down the problem in a step-by-step process so that they could follow it. So I started learning how I can organize my thoughts better, how I can organize the steps better, how I can, what's the process through which I report something to someone and expect a change that then I can go back and test again, and then how do we communicate that to the players? So I started putting step-to-step processes together. So that's the main thing, I learned in QA. I did that for a number of years until I started getting to the point at which my people skills and my organization skills were starting to make me a good leader. I was teaching other QA people how to do their job better, how to put their thoughts in a step, which I'm having problems with right now, put their thoughts into step-by-step processes and communicating those to the developers. But I was also getting to the point at which I could assess myself in the things that I was seeing, where our biggest problems lied, and what was the actual damage to the business, leaving this thing versus another thing, which is where I started picking up my business skills. So in that process, at this point, I was a QA lead. I still had a lot of that creativity, though. I still wanted to tell stories. So I was drawn between design or more leadership work, which is along the lines of production. I decided to try both. So I had the opportunity come up where I could go back to school and finish my degree, because I had not actually finished it at that point, but also go work as an intern designer for a startup company, where I learned all about world design, world building, content. I was writing stories all day. But I found myself continuing to be distracted by the people skills and the business problems that were occurring in the startup company I was in. So when that company ended up failing, I decided that that's what I needed to do. That's when I had my big moment, was the day that I saw the designs that I worked on for a year and a half get shut down so that nobody would ever see them, and my heart was broken. I decided that it was my goal in life that other designers never have to go through that because of bad business decisions, a bad setup. And so that's when I found that my calling was really in production. So that is my main focus right now, is using all of these skill sets that I've learned over the years in making a business that allows other creative people put their thoughts and their ideas out in the world for players to enjoy. Let me see if I can go back on my points here. So the whole reason of that entire big story was that for me, at these various points in my career, I found what was my strong point to start with, and I focused hard on that while I learned the other things. The main thing right now that keeps me going is my people skills. So for right now, it's about creating communication channels between my various, the players and my developers and the people running the business above me, and making sure that that communication flow is constantly going. But I'm also pretty good at these other areas. The main thing is, even if you find that you have one of these skills really strongly, but maybe you don't have the other ones, is if you are a leader, right, a team leader, finding people that you can put on your team who have strengths in the areas that you're missing. Not only are you helping to balance your team and create fill up a hole that's missing, but you also are giving yourself the opportunity to learn from that person. right? Watch how they're doing these things that they're better at than you, and learn from that, right? Absorb that and take that and be part of you and make it part of your career. Yes, so this is on the idea of if you're not doing the jobs that you wanted to do, right? Right now, like when I was doing QA work, I didn't think of myself as wanting to be a quality assurance tester for a living. But I learned so much about game development and the people who are making those games when I was in quality assurance that there's no way I would be successful in my career if I had not done those years. So that's the main thing, is when you leave this school, you're going to go out in the real world and you might find a perfect match for what you want to do. You might. But more than likely, you're going to find something that's not quite what you want to do, but still within the realm of game development. Or maybe it's not in game development. Maybe it's in business software, but will give you more programming skills that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Always find a way that that job is actually feeding into the job that you want to do someday. Because we can learn from anything that we're doing, right? So whether that be QA tester, whether it be, programming for, some missile launch or something, and not actually the game you want to be on, whether it's drawing art for an advertising agency instead of a video game, those skills that you're learning in that job are still applicable. So focus on what you're learning there instead of just on this isn't the thing that I wanted to be doing, right? Because it's all going to be feeding into your future. So the number one thing I would say is important for producers, no matter what your company might want to call them, whether you're in the project management where you're managing schedules, or whether you're actually doing team management, or if you're a producer that works for a publisher and you're not actually working on the studio, and what you're doing is making sure that this studio gets the funding that they need for that project. All of it is about communication. The main job of a producer, the main thing you're in charge of, is communication flow. You're not controlling the communication. You're controlling the communication flow. You're making sure that it gets to where it needs to go in the right amount, because sometimes there's too much communication, right? If I'm going to my lead programmer's desk every 10 minutes to ask him about something or even tell him about things that he wants to know about, he's not programming, he's listening to me talking in his ear for an hour, right? So he's not getting his work done. So there's too much communication, right? So I have to control the flow to make sure that the right information is getting to the right place at the right time. That's my main job. If you want to be a producer, I hope you love meetings. I love meetings. And anytime I hear somebody say they want to be a producer but they hate meetings, I wonder if they've chosen the right job. Because your job is all about communication flow. Communication happens in meetings. Not just the giant meetings, and I hope you don't make meetings like this, where there's like 30 or 40 people in the room. Some of the information's applicable to some of them. Most of the information's not applicable to all of them. That is a waste of a meeting. First of all, we can learn meeting skills, how to actually create meetings. Make sure you have the right people invited, that you have the agenda set, you know what the subject is that you're talking about. Everybody knows that ahead of time so that they know whether it's important for them to be there or not. Definitely make sure that if you believe it's important for somebody to be there, that they are there. Sometimes people decide that it's not important for them, but there's actually critical information that you need from that person or to get to that person. And meetings are your main way to do this. So, and this can be a one-on-one meeting, right, on a regular basis. Most of my day is meetings. And some of that is just coffee chats with my individual developers on a one-on-one, checking to make sure that what they need to get their jobs done is getting to them. Do they have the training that they're looking for? Is their career path in the right way? You know, is this next priority that we have going something that they fully understand? You know, or just in general, how is their day doing? Right? I do a lot of just checking in with my team and making sure that they're good. Right? Are you guys good? Are you happy? Is there anything you need? Because my job is communication. It's also getting those hurdles out of the way for them so they can do the thing that they are most skilled at, which is creating a game. So, love those meetings. And if you don't love them, figure out why and fix them. Because if you don't love them, then clearly, then most likely the people you're inviting to them don't love them either. And there's something that you can do to adjust it. Yeah, so this is again about the communication flow. It's not just about speaking to your development team, and depending on the type of producer you might be or the type of project manager you might be, you'll be talking to anyone between your developers, making sure your developers are happy and talking to each other, right? That art and engineering and design are not all on different wavelengths about what's going on. They're not all sitting in their separate corners and just throwing emails at each other, that they actually do get together and have a conversation. People work better together when they actually see another human being in that role. But this is also about your operations departments, right? So my support team, so customer support, the operations department who actually put the server code or put the game code up on the servers every day. I'm talking to those guys on a regular basis, making sure that they have what they need to keep my game stable and running and live. But I also have to talk to executives, right? On a regular basis, I have to go report up to my boss and tell him that the numbers look good or they don't look good, and you know what I'm going to need budget-wise next year, what I expect to be able to deliver next year. All of that information has to go, you know, above me as well. And then customers. Customer communication is a huge thing. It's possible that you might find that you're not the right person to communicate with customers. Customers are a very difficult group of people to communicate with because they don't have the insight into what you're doing every day. They just have a passion for that thing that you've created. So they're wanting to tell you about it and wanting to tell you about, you know, their experience and how important it is. And they have ideas about how it might, you know, what it might take to create the thing that they want, but they don't actually have the experience of doing it. So sometimes those communications be very difficult. In my job, we have a role called community manager who mainly deals with that communication flow. And we have customer service as well, but that's specifically about like actual problems that you're experiencing in game right now. Let's see how we can help you. The community manager handles all of our social media and our forums, and they're really getting that day-to-day feel of what the community is wanting and how they're feeling, and he's communicating it back to the rest of the team. Because I have some experience in doing that work, I tend to be an upfront executive producer. I'll actually be on the forums having conversations with players as well. That really takes some PR skills, because there are days when you're just frustrated and you might snap and say the wrong thing, in which case you have to recognize that in yourself and step away, right? Because your customer is important and you want to keep them happy. So you really have to learn your way around that. So I would definitely suggest slowing and easing your way into that. And if that is not your skill set, knowing how to PR yourself in front of customers is not your skill set, find somebody who does have that strong skill set. Because either way, that communication has to happen. They will give you the best information, because only they know what game they want to play, right? So communication, so big. And this is actually a little special thing that I decided to throw in here, because I've actually run into people before who have told me that they couldn't do my job, or they couldn't be an executive producer because they're introverts. Production is not just for extroverts. I am an introvert. The only reason why I was ever trained in theater was because I had a speech impediment when I was a child, and nobody could ever hear me because I talked really quiet in the background, which I'm sure those of you in the back right now are shocked that that ever happened. I spent years and years and years trying to train myself out of that shyness. And I still, even to this day, am very much an introvert. I am so happy that after I am done with this day, I'm going to go cave in my hotel room like nobody's business and get all my energy back, because this is going to take everything from me. Most of my days at work take everything from me. But I find it important that I am the conduit of communication for the other introverts that are on my team who can't speak for themselves, right? Haven't learned those skills. So I would encourage you that if you do see yourself as an introvert, and it kind of intimidates you to stand in front of people or to take charge of a team, don't count yourself out. You just have to find other ways to handle this. So main thing, actually, introverts can make really great producers because they're great at listening. I'm talking a lot up here. I very rarely talk. Even when I'm in meetings with my own team, I'm all about listening. My favorite part of my job is sitting in a room, giving people a topic, and then just sitting back and taking it all in, right? It is so important as a producer, as a leader in general, to have great listening skills, because your employees, because your customers, because your bosses are constantly telling you what they want from you. You just have to be able to hear it. So if you're listening, you'll hear it and you'll be able to act on it. So that's actually a really great skill that you can build on. And it's all about spotlighting your team. That's the other thing about, sometimes we see these big aggrandizing executive producers, right, that get all of these interviews and are always in front of the press talking about their product, and that's great, right? They're evangelizing for their product. But if that's not you, right, and sometimes the problem with those people is that it can feel less like that product is about the team who built it and more about that person, that spokesperson that's in front of it. And that's not, sometimes that can be role of a producer, right? Every game needs somebody who's going to go out and evangelize for it. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the role of the producer. One of the biggest things that I try to make sure that I'm doing on a regular basis is that I'm spotlighting the team that actually built this product. When we do interviews for the update that we're working on, right, I pick out those designers that put the most work or had the biggest ideas for this product, and I push them out in front, right? Push them out, get them interviewing, get them talking about what they do. Because for one, they're going to have more details on it. If somebody asks like highly detailed questions about how'd you get to this point, they built it, right? And they should get credit for the work that they're doing, right? My job as a leader isn't to take all the credit for that work that 40 people are doing. My job as a leader is to make sure that those 40 people can do that work that they want to do, and then watch them do it, right? And help them get over any hurdles. So. Great thing about introverts as producers is you're more likely to spotlight your team, which is a great skill to develop. And then just find your recharge space, right? I have my own office, which is great. You don't always necessarily have that. Sometimes it's just a headset that you can just put on and focus into your game for a little while or something. But yeah, if you're intimidated by crowds, about getting out and speaking in front of people, by having a lot of meetings and people coming into your office, find that space, find that time for you when you can just shut all of that out and be back in your little happy alone zone and recharge before you stress yourself out too much. So, introverts too, yay. Okay, so I kind of just jumped to the questions thing. Like I said, I wasn't quite sure what specific needs you guys would have. So it'd be really great just to hear from you on what questions you might have or what challenges you might be facing. So I have at least half an hour for questions. Who's first? Yeah.
I just have a basic one. I don't know if I missed it or not, but where is Turbine, and like how big is the team that you're kind of overseeing or working with?
Okay, so the question was, where is Turbine? So we are just outside of Boston in a little town called Needham, which is a kind of a Boston suburb. My team in particular that works on Lord of the Rings Online is about 40 people, and that's everything from the developers to the support staff that supports them, so marketing, customer service, QA, operations, all of that. Yes?
What kind of task management system do you use there or have used in the past? And in your experience, what do you feel like works best for you?
Okay. The question was, what kind of task management systems do we work with? Yeah. What have I liked in the past? What's worked? Right now, we're using Handsoft. I'm actually a big fan of Handsoft. I've worked with them in a couple of different companies. I find that the software it's all in one place. I can see both my schedule view as well as the individual tasks and organize my product backlog. It works well for a large team that isn't necessarily communicating with each other every day. We do work in an agile system, kind of Scrum, not really. So I wouldn't say it's specifically Scrum. So we'll have a stand-up every day to talk about what we're working on. But we're still a little large for a real core Scrum team. So Handsoft is helping us keep all of that. We do work in sprints. So every 2 weeks, we have lined up what our priorities are, and people are breaking out their tasks for that. But it's also a very light version. We're not super process heavy on this team, mainly because I'm working on a team that's been together for over 10 years. There are some new people on it, like I just came onto this team a little over a year ago. But for the majority of the people on there, I have very senior staff. So they have a good idea of what they need to do for each update that we're doing, so they'll do very light tasking because they're pretty good at already knowing how long it's going to take them, what they need to do, and moving there. So what we're focusing on in our task management is more that handoff stuff. So Art knows what Art's expected to do in this time frame, so we make sure that we have any requests that we have for the other teams in there. Same thing for engineering, et cetera. So we're very light on that. Other systems that I've worked with, personally, I still carry a notepad around. I have a notepad with a pen that is attached to me all day at work. Literally, I will know within 2 minutes if I put it down and didn't pick it up. So I just scribble things down for myself and then scratch them off as I go through the day. We use Jira in other areas of the company, so there are some tasks like when I have a request for operations or whatever, I put that through Jira. Jira I find is really great for ticketing systems. So if I know I have a thing that I need somebody else to do, and that's about the extent of it, then Jira is really great. I have a hard time making Jira work for me where I can actually see my schedules in it, and so that's why I'm not as big of a fan of that one. But I know that they've got a lot of plugins and stuff that help that out. I think once you find a system that works for you, or especially if it's a software, you just kind of get holed into that and you like it. But there's definitely some appeal to that one as well. Yes?
You said you like to promote communication between disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering, what are some of the ways you do that, especially if there's something that one discipline needs from another and they're not communicating that effectively?
So right now, I discovered that problem when I came into my new team, that the art team felt a lot of times that they were getting last minute requests. So I actually encouraged my art director to do this himself, to just go ahead and set up times when he would just have a one-on-one, like a weekly one-on-one with the other leads on the team, and just kind of go through, hey, in Handsoft it says we're working on this thing. What do you need from my team to do that? And do you have any idea on where in the timeline you're going to need that? I very much encourage setting up one-on-one meetings between the leadership on your team, if not even the leadership, like individuals of different disciplines, on a regular basis, so that they're not necessarily a leads meeting. I have that too, right? Where all of us get in the same room and we talk about the main priorities. But I find that if in a group environment, you're less likely to connect to another individual on a specific like task level basis. So what I like seeing just, saying, hey, art and programming, you guys go sit down and make sure there isn't anything that you're crossing wires on, right? And go have a coffee for 15 minutes and chat it out. All of a sudden they start creating bonds and they're more likely to speak to each other. And you might have to set that up like as a third party to get it rolling. And then after a little while, it should just start rolling, right? And you check back in and you see, are people starting to, suss out the problems that they're having? If you need to put process around it, you could, right? You could say, all right, let's actually sit down and go through our task management software and make sure that we're all lined up on these tasks. But I think it really just depends on what is the specific personality configuration on your team. Yeah. Yep.
Is your team before you ever divided into smaller, like strike teams for specific issues, or do they normally just divide themselves up by discipline and focus on a singular issue at a time?
Often it's by discipline. It kind of depends. We've got a wide variety of things that we're working on a normal basis. So we have a pretty standard, every update we'll put out a chunk of content, and then we'll put out a bit of systems. And so it kind of depends on what feature they're working on. They'll kind of roll off onto individual teams. So we have one artist that's constantly working with the world builders. When the world builders are in the middle of making a new zone, this artist is, so the three of them are almost constantly interlinked. There might be something that artist gets pulled off on every now and then, but most of the time it's the three of them building new zones. A similar thing for, the guy that designs all of our specific items, so he's like mainly our systems guy. He'll work specifically with our director to make sure that any contract work we need for new items are being handled, or if there's a new UI request or that thing, they'll kind of spin off and do something on their own. My engineers, it just depends on what feature they're working on. So whoever actually is needing engineering support is usually working side by side with one or the other of them. So we do kind of roll off into little teams, but it really is just feature specific. It's not, we don't always have a team that does this versus another one that does this. Now, when the team was larger, that would happen. So when the team was larger, we had them split up by, like, here's the group of guys that are working specifically on, skills balance. And that's what they do, and that's what they focus on, right? And but now our team is, right, I have such a small group pool of designers at this point that it's kind of a more natural flow. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe your team is too small, but what do you do about, how do you handle finger pointing?
Finger pointing. Okay, so I'm guessing that this is about, like, something happens and you ask what happened, and it's just person A is saying it was totally person C's fault, and I don't know why they're always.
And it just goes around.
Yeah, but it wasn't me. It was because person B didn't give me the thing.
Your team is too small for that.
No, we have that. We have that, right? All teams do. I think there's a thing where because our industry is so competitive, there's this habit of wanting to protect yourself, right? And make sure that whatever blame doesn't fall on you because you don't want to ruin your career, right? If this thing goes down, it's not going to be my fault because then I won't get hired in. One thing that I try to do to work around that is to encourage the fact that we all make mistakes, right? Mistakes happen. I make mistakes all the time, right? The secret is owning that mistake and fixing it. If we're spending all of our time pointing fingers and placing blame on each other, we're working on fixing the problem. And so one thing you'll find, if I'm in the middle of a meeting and somebody says, whatever's on fire, let's spend some time figuring out whose fault that is, shut that down. It's not about whose fault it is. It's about fixing the problem. So let's fix the problem. Then let's go back and do a postmortem and see where the communication fell down, or where there was an error that we just couldn't surpass, and then let's own it and let's work towards it. towards fixing it going forward, right? And not repeating that same mistake. Now, when it comes to the finger pointing, so one step is to get away from the blame, because it's not about blame. But at some point, there is a place where that problem came up, right? So we have to fix that problem. I think the other side of that is giving faith to your staff that it's okay to make a mistake and then go back and fix it. That we are all flawed human beings, and one way to do that is to set an example. For one, owning up when you make your own mistakes. Say, yep, we pushed that update out too early. It was buggy. I shouldn't have said, let's go. I should have held it back. It's now out there and we have to fix it, but that was my call and I own it. That was my fault, right? And then letting them see you own that and then move forward from it tells them that it's okay for them to do the same thing. Own it, fix it, move forward. I don't like seeing managers who like to threaten their employees constantly with the state of their jobs, the security of their jobs. That's not helping anybody, right? That's not making them want to be a better employee for you. It's just making them start looking. That's really what it boils down to. If someone's constantly threatening your job because you're a human being who makes mistakes, you're not going to want to hang around. You're gonna feel insecure and you're gonna go want to look somewhere else. But if your boss is saying, hey, mistakes happen, let's dig into how this happened and why and try to fix it, then you're more likely to say, hey, yeah, okay, you get it. I'm a human, I'm gonna stay here, I'm gonna fix it. You get me. So I'm less likely to go look at another company because for all I know, I could end up with another boss who doesn't understand, right, human flaws. So. Yeah, the finger pointing is all about get it out of the way and then really dig into where it came from, right? A lot of times finger pointing actually comes from a lack of communication. It really comes from this guy and this guy weren't talking to each other and stuff fell down. Yep.
I'm not sure if I know how to word this correctly, but it's something having to do with sort of spheres of influence. And if you have a team member that actually wants to be more communicative than maybe they should be, and they're kind of going over to other team members and saying that's the way it should be, but actually that's not controlling the flow of communicating. So what would your thoughts be for someone that's like a lead on a project to say, hey, like come to me first with those issues, or how would you kind of...
Okay, so the question was around how do you deal with team members who are kind of almost stepping outside of the realm of their experience and trying to advise other team members. Am I getting that right or summarizing? For one, I would check in with that person and see where that behavior is coming from. I've seen that behavior happen. Once again, it's a fall down in communication. Often it's because this person has an idea of how they want something done and they feel like they're not being heard. So they take it upon themselves to go out and start telling everyone that they can, tell. And so I would call in that person and find out where it is they feel like they're not being heard or where they feel the problem is in the project that they have to go and, talk to all the other leads about how to do, their parts of it. And really focus in on that, of what's causing the behavior instead of the behavior itself. And then find a way to correct that problem so that there's no longer a need to go out and talk about the other problems. So it could be that maybe that person actually wants to be, say they're a designer, right? And they're constantly going over to art and saying, like, this is totally not the way you should be doing this art, right? This art should be in this other way, and you should be using this other program, and I have all these ideas that you should listen to. Does that designer actually want to be an artist? Right? Maybe we should dig into that. Maybe we should find out if that's actually their passion and they're over here doing this design work. And in that case, I would say, hey, I think it's great that you want to be an artist, and let's work on a path to get you there. But in the meantime, I need you to do the design work because that's what's critical to the team for you to be doing right now. And so I'd really like you to focus on this. And let those artists do the art their way, right? And if there's problems in that, then we should definitely talk to the lead over there and make sure that they're doing the work that they should be doing, and it's up to the quality that the team's expecting. But we need you focusing on this area that you're assigned to for this project. So you kind of do a two-prong, solution to it. For one, find a way, create the path. Right? Start building a path to letting that person go do that thing that they're wanting to do, but focus in on the right now. We need to be working. We need you here, right? We need you here in this spot, and definitely be pulling that communication, especially about when it comes to comments about other work by other team members. That kind of feedback, especially if it's negative feedback, should be coming through the leads department, right? Because the lead is going to be more aware of what was asked of that person in the first place. So if it's a quality issue, it could be because that person was actually instructed to do that work in 5 minutes. So yeah, it's not going to be top quality, but we knew that when we asked them to do it. So if you're going and having a conversation without figuring out where that instruction came from in the first place, you might be giving critiques that are invalid, right? So make sure that the right communication flow is going and that you have respect for your other team members. So that's a big thing, is that as a team lead, you need to instill this sense of common respect. Every person on that team is an expert in what they're doing, or else they wouldn't be on this team. We picked them specifically to do this role because of the skills that they have, right? And as fellow team members, we should respect that, right? Respect that their skill as a designer, they were hired to do, and that if there's problems in that, it is their lead's job to fix that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get feedback. Give feedback, but make sure it's going through the right channels, right? It's going to their manager, it's going to their lead, so that if there is some kind of process for correcting that behavior, it's going through the right channels, right? And so that the people who are most informed about what's going on are figuring that out. But in the meantime, we should all trust each other as team members that we are all trying to do the best work that we could possibly do. Right. Does that help? Yeah. Okay, good. Anybody else?
Yeah, so it sounds like you've worked at quite a few companies, if not several.
Mm-hmm.
Before you're where you're at now, would you recommend, like, if you're stuck in a position that you feel like you're not going anywhere for your personal goals, would you recommend to maybe try to get a different position or move to a different company in order to further evolve and develop your skill set?
Okay, so the question was, if you feel like you're stuck in the company that you're at and you're at a point in which you can't develop your career goals further, should you try to look for somewhere else? I would say yes. I mean, first of all, I would check to make sure that you've all used all the channels that you have available to you at your company. Go and talk to your manager. Talk to the people who are running the company in general and say, hey, I'm really interested in advancing, to a leadership position, right? I want to be a lead programmer, right, and lead my own team. But, I've been doing this work for so long and I'm not seeing the opportunities come up. Is there something that I'm missing, in your opinion, to be that position? Or is it that the position just isn't open and might not be, and if that's the case, when do you foresee a position coming open in this position, in this spot? If that's a long time down the road, then yeah, maybe it's time to go look at another studio that's growing in that area. I mean, that's the honest thing about business, is that especially when you get to the point at which you're doing leadership development, I'd love to hire all the talented people that I know to come develop on my game. But the truth is that's not budgetary, right? Like, that's just, the budgets don't make sense for me to hire everybody I know that's highly talented, right? I would love to give a ton of people promotions, but that's not always available either, especially when you're talking about leader positions, because I don't need 2 or 3 leads within a discipline on one team. That doesn't make any sense, and that creates huge communication issues, right? So sometimes the opportunity is outside of the company or the studio, but I would definitely go and check with the leadership of your company. Is something going to be coming up, right? And is the reason why I haven't been pushed into this new space because I'm missing some skill that I could go out and learn, or I could start mentoring with somebody else who does it. But yeah, sometimes the answer is, go somewhere else. And that was, when I ended up leaving NCSoft, it was because there wasn't space for me me to move into production or into design. And so there was a studio that needed someone to fill those positions, so that was the time for me to make that move. Yes?
Do you have any specific examples or stories dealing with anything of the things that you've mentioned up to this point? Like you had a specific problem at a company and you're like, we found a way to fix this thing, this is what happened.
Can you be more specific than that?
Say there was some sort of mismanagement in like communication between teams or something, you found a way to fix that.
Okay. Let me think of
Or just random game stories, that's fine.
random game stories. Oh, wow. Okay. It's so general. I didn't prep stories coming up.
Well, I just want to have an example of something that actually happened. I think it'd be fun.
Okay. Some of these actually have been. I mean, I can't tell you specific stories that happen because then I get in trouble with the people who were involved in that. But let me think of a specific one that I haven't already used. So skill set, division. So right now I'm actually in the midst, very, very early steps of developing a new company with a business partner, who's actually one of my best friends. And this would be a side company. It's not even something we expect to make our livings off of anytime soon. I love my job. I'm going to continue doing my job. But there's this, I spend all my day producing stuff, but I'm not doing a lot of creative work. And I still have a very immense love for theater, right? Theatrical storytelling. So I just happen to have met another woman who is very much into interactive storytelling as well, right? And we both wanted to find some way to do, it's not quite LARPing, right? We do LARPing together too. But find a way to do these highly, involved, interactive, live games where, people can be together experiencing a game and telling a story. And I never would have done this if it was just me. Because while I have skills at, developing, I can balance budgets, I can come up with how to build a company, I have never been the idea person. So anytime somebody has said, hey, why don't you just go off and start your own company? I'd be like, great, but I don't know what we'd do. I'd build a company, I'd maybe hire some people that are really great, and I'd hope that they had an idea. Because I don't have any ideas about actual, what I actually want to build. So it just so happens that I ran into someone else who had that same feeling of a thing that she wanted to build, but she is full of ideas. She's just full of game ideas. So, I took that opportunity to grab on and say, hey, you've got this major skill set that I'm missing. Let's do this together, right? And we're both, and she was like, you have skill sets I'm missing, and so let's partner. And I think that's one of the best way to build a team, is find those people who are passionate about the thing you're passionate about, but in a slightly different way, right? So that you're adding to each other, and together you make a better thing, right? Yep.
What kind of LARPing did you do? And how do you think that specifically related to what you're doing right now?
So I'm involved. I've been involved in a couple of LARPs now. I learned LARP when I moved to New England. It was not something that people really did in Texas. I started with a steampunk LARP run by some friends of mine that was very, very heavy on story. I mean, it's boffer LARP too, so there's like fighting involved too. But my first character was actually a non-combat character, so for me it was all about the storytelling between the characters. And then I actually started playing a post-apocalyptic LARP from a similar crew of people that we do now. So these are like full weekend, go out for the entire weekend, be that character that you built, build costumes around it, whack on each other with foam swords, kind of stuff. So that's what I do. And it's really great. It gives me a chance to do the creative side of my brain. I build costumes, I tell stories. But at the same time, I'm working on my team building skills all the time. We have to go into combat together. So we have to figure out how we're going to do this. How are we going to problem solve? Who's going to flank and who's going to be on the front, right, with sword and with shields. So, yeah.
Were there any particular communication or organization challenges you faced when working on a live environment?
Yes. So live environments mean live customers, right?
Yes.
The biggest challenge in a live environment is deciding the cost of bringing your service down to fix it. Is the bug that you're running into something that's going to affect your customer base so much that it's worth shutting it down for a number of hours? Because for every minute that one of my games is dark, we're losing money, right? Because they're only spending if it's up and going. So your constant live environment challenges is it worth it to bring it down? The other thing is that you are in service to hundreds of thousands of people at one time. And when you hear the phrase, the customer is always right, it's true. I want the customer to be right. Which one am I going to listen to, right? So the other challenge there is doing what's best for the customer and what's best for the business, but that you can still only listen to so many of those customers at once. My number one way of dealing that is focusing down on what is my target customer for this specific thing that I'm dealing with, right? Because you can only listen to so many voices at once. So it really helps if you can just narrow it down. What's my target right now, right? So if I'm thinking about when I need to bring the servers down for an update, for example, I have to choose a time to do that. When is the most effective time for me to bring my service down? Now, you would think the most effective time would probably be 3 a.m. when I have no customers, or very little, right, very few customers on the service. But that means I have to ask my operations guys to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning. Most of them work a 9 to 5 like the rest of us. They have families, they have schedules, is that something that it's worth asking them to come in, right? And so you have to constantly be making the, that value judgment of, if I bring it down at 8 o'clock in the morning, that means that I'm cutting into the play hours for my European customers, but I'm not burning out my staff. And so, how does it weigh, right? Is it worth that risk? Is there some in between that you can get to? That kind of thing. I think that's the biggest thing, is that anytime you make a change in a live environment, you're having an immediate effect on your customer base, an immediate effect on your revenue for that time period. So. Yes?
On that same note, do you usually try to also time those fixes with content updates to kind of reward the player as well for having that downtime?
Yes. So the question is, do you time downtimes with content update as much as you possibly can? So, for example, a couple weeks back, I was told that we needed to bring down the service to do some back-end upgrading that had nothing to do specifically with my service. It was like a game, service-wide thing for multiple games. So I already knew I'm going to have to take that downtime. So I made sure that we had first I checked with operations if there would be any problem with me actually putting game code on top of that. Because sometimes you don't want to muddy the waters, right? Sometimes it's like, we're making this change, and if you also make a change over here, if something happens, I don't know if it's from this or that, right? So sometimes you want to keep it pure. But if they're like, yeah, we've got time to, this isn't actually going to take our time to bring this down and do this thing. So we could also push a game push at the same time. Then I take advantage of that. I put out bug fixes in that case. If I didn't actually have a bit of content, what I'll do is, if I have a couple of weeks to work on it, I'll just do a large patch that fixes a bunch of bugs. Right. Yep.
You talked about communicating with the players personally. How often does that yield just inflammatory results? Because you said you have to have good PR skills, so I'm assuming
You do.
more often than not.
You do. It depends on what's going on, right? The happiness of your community actually has a lot to do with their general, overall world happiness, right? And that can be affected by anything. So if you're going through some major changes, like my product's going through some major changes right now, where we are moving it to a brand new data center. We are basically taking 8 years of game data, putting it on brand new hardware, updating all of its operating systems, and moving it 2 states into a brand new data center. At the same time, I'm reducing my servers to at half of what they used to be, right? So there's only maybe half as many. So I'm having to move all of this data, all of this hardware, and basically move these players, right? There's 19 worlds worth of players that I've basically told them I need them to up and move to other servers, right? And I did a lot of things to try to make that as smooth as possible, to give them a little advantage in doing it, that kind of thing. But it destabilizes them. It makes them uncomfortable. It makes them nervous. I just forced change on them, and people don't like change, right? And so it puts them in a sour mood. So even if I'm putting out new happy content to them, they've got this other thing that's making them unhappy. Until that transition is completed, they're going to be in an unstable and unhappy space. And then as well as they're also being affected by just the things happening in our world right now. If there's a whole lot of bad news on the news, our community gets much more negative, right? If news is not bad, if the world in general is running happy, then they're more likely to accept any changes to their, to the game world in a better light. So right now, pending the things going on in the world, and also the fact that I'm forcing a lot of change on them, they tend to be pretty negative about stuff. The big trick to that is just understanding it and understanding where it's coming from. We have a much different reaction to human beings if we can talk to them through a computer, because they're no longer human beings. I could just throw text at you, right? I don't see your face. So I don't see you as a person. I see you as this thing that's making my life miserable. So I'm going to throw stuff at you because it gives me a release, right? As the person receiving that on the other end, you have to separate. You have to understand, right? You have to understand and say, this isn't me they're talking to. They're feeding their frustration and their anger into just anything they can get, right? And they don't see a human being on the other side of this computer. If I actually go talk to customers in real life, or even we had a load test the other day, and just in chat, right? They're asking me questions in chat, far more happy, right? Just because of they're getting real-time communication with me. So they see another person over there. So yeah, it's a matter of understanding that and saying, hey, there's this limit. And sometimes actually a producer I worked for many years ago gave me a great bit of advice in that he just doesn't answer emails that don't need an answer, right? And he meant emails across everything, right? Just in general, company communications. If you send something to him, he's not going to send you an email back and say, yep, I got it. Nope, there's no point. To him, it's that's a waste of time, right? You sent me communication. I'm going to absorb it. If I feel like I need to pass some communication back to you, I will. So when talking to angry customers, what we do is we take in the communication, we read it and say, is this angry? Take whatever value out of it you can, which is, hey, I'm having an unpleasant experience in your game right now because of XYZ, right? Boil it down to that. Make a note of that, and then move on, right? Delete it from your inbox if you need to, so you don't get angry when you come back and read it again. But yeah, it's a matter of just taking that in. And then the response back, you know, sometimes it can feel pretty blunt, but sometimes you do respond back and you say, thank you for your feedback. Click send and let it go, right? Yep.
As new students who are soon going to be trying to enter the industry for the first time, do you have any best advice for us, what potential employers are going to be looking for from us, how to try to find a job?
So the big thing is to, for one, focus in, be very specific about jobs that you're applying for. So what I mean by that is have at least a cover letter. Like you should be writing a new cover letter for each job you're applying to, right? It should be that customized. It should be about why you're right for that company and that job in particular. Your resume could even be more specific than that. Make sure that you know what all of your skill sets are so that you are widening your pool as much as possible, right? When I was looking for a job in the games industry, I didn't think I was going to luck on an actor job. That's probably the only actor job I've ever seen in the games industry. So I had to sit there and think, what other things could I do? And a lot of times that meant just reading through job descriptions. Lots and lots of job descriptions say, does any of this look like me? And if not, what can I do to make myself look like that, right? So those are two things, right? Make sure that you know what your full variety of skill sets are and be prepared to set up that. But also make sure that when you're applying, you're very specific about the thing that you're doing that you're applying to. But in the cover letter also, if you know that there's multiple jobs that this company could put you in, that's your opportunity to make your resume maybe a little more generic. And then in your cover letter say, I'm applying for this job. This is why I'd be great for this job. But I also have these other skill sets. Because I tell you, hiring somebody that I know I could fit into more than one role is far more valuable to me than someone who's only good at this one thing. Sometimes I'll be in a position where I really only need someone who's very, very good at this one thing. But usually a better hire is someone who is good at this thing, but if they need to, they can do these other things. Because that tells me that I'm more flexible in should the situation change on the product I'm working on, and all of a sudden we have to be working on something different, I can still utilize that person, right? Yep?
Your number one book or reading otherwise, industry or otherwise related for being a better producer, what would you recommend?
For being a better producer?
Or managing your success.
Okay, I would definitely dig into, well, it kind of depends on where your skill set is. Look into a lot of project management stuff. That's usually what you're going to do when you first enter the industry as a producer, is project management skills. So there are a couple of books just on project management itself. I would look into Agile Development. I think that's actually the name of the book. The other thing I would actually recommend in this class is actually the one that I'm finishing listening to right now, and it's called Quitter, or How to Make Your Dream Job, How to Transition from Your Day Job to Your Dream Job. It's by John Aker, A-C-K-E-R. I'm just finishing up reading or listening to this book on Audible, and it is a really good example of how not to just, how to really appreciate that job that gets you paid every day while still working on your dream, and ways to balance that out that include being really awesome at the thing you're doing every day and not taking away from that, and thinking about how the value you're getting from that job still feeds into that thing you're working to, and being really safe about building to your dream, right? So I would recommend doing that one, because I think everybody in this room is considering their dream job. right? That's what we're thinking towards when you're in a class like this. So I really recommend that book for thinking about how smart ways to do that. Yes?
So beyond applying for jobs, networking is also important.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your advice to students who meet someone like you at the executive level?
Yep.
And how to network with you in the sense of jobs and where you fit in the pipeline of hiring?
Okay. So the question was like networking with folks like myself. So for one, to network with me, I highly recommend picking up my card. Another thing in remembering, like folks like myself who might go and talk to a lot of student groups, like please don't expect me to remember all of you. I can't even possibly keep it all in my head. But but that never means if I hand you my card, it means I am happy to receive emails from you. Please send me emails. It might take me a couple of days, although usually I'm pretty fast on email responses. Email me if you have questions about companies that I've worked for, or people that I've worked for, or just general advice on career stuff. I'm usually very happy. Most people who come and do these talks are. If they didn't want to help, they wouldn't be here. So to reach out, use those contacts. I'm happy. I'm always happy to get emails from students that I've talked to, or even just in general meeting. So get out there, meet lots of people, save those cards. Put them in your LinkedIn. I'm not always really great about connecting to people on LinkedIn that I have not actually worked with, and that's because I find a lot of value in actually having a real opinion of a person that's on my LinkedIn list. So don't be insulted if I don't accept your LinkedIn request, or if somebody else that you speak to doesn't, because they might be doing the same thing. I like to keep it as a contact list of people that I've actually interacted with, so that when somebody says, hey, do you know XYZ, I can say, I do, and I have an opinion, right? Instead of, I don't, actually. They just randomly reached out to me, and I just keep this list because it's fun. It's not about how many people I have on a list. It's about how I know those people, for me. But despite that fact, you should all hold on to emails of people that you meet this way, so that when you do need to reach out to them, you can. And hopefully you can make that bigger connection that would then get you on their list, right? Maybe they then have a couple of conversations with you. I can get a feel for who you are, what you're about, and then you make that next step, right? Where I am in the hiring process, I actually do hire onto my team. I'm a hiring manager on my team. My team isn't growing super fast right now because it is an older product, but we are building new products at my studio all the time, so I'm advising other managers, and at some point, fingers crossed, I'll have my own new project at some point, and I'll be hiring again on that. We are, however, hiring interns constantly. There's always intern programs happening, so make sure to put that in your list. I know that we'll be looking on my team in particular, a design intern, an engineering intern, and an art intern next year. So keep that in your pockets. Trying to think, I think that's about it. We are looking for a tech artist right now too, so I do need a tech artist. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes?
So I was just looking on the Wikipedia for Turbine,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw you guys were acquired by Warner Brothers. I'm wondering if that affected how you do your job at all, or was it just like, we now own you, or is it just like, we now own you and we would like to influence the way you do things a little bit? Like, how does that? Because I know a lot of game
yeah.
companies and other things will be bought out by like another bigger company, like EA or like Riot was bought out by Tencent.
Yeah. It really depends on the companies and the situation that they're in. So I can only speak from my experience at other companies that have gone through similar acquisitions. I joined Turbine after it was already part of WB Games. So the buyout, I believe, happened like 5 or 6 years ago. I just joined the company a little less than 5 years ago. So, for me, just my experience, the WB being head of Turbine or owning Turbine, is a huge benefit to Turbine. When a larger company like that acquires a small studio, what you get is the comfort and security of major financial backing, right? And there's benefit systems, there's all kinds of things that are already established in a large corporation like that you then get like wrapped into, right? I've also worked for a number of startups. Actually, I was at like 3 different failed startups before I ended up at the company that I'm at now. And so for me, it's a major difference, right? Startups are small and scrappy, and if you get benefits, that's great. But a lot of times when people are building their startups, they're just building to try to get a product out the door. They're not building to make a really secure working environment a long-term business, which I have concerns with myself. And when I get to the point of actually pushing, someday pushing my own company into startup mode, for me, my goal is to build a strong business that can support creative people in building their games. But that's not necessarily how startups always work. Sometimes it's just about getting the game out there, right?
It's nice to be able to have like access to a library of IP.
Oh,
But then
yes.
you can choose your game ideas like, well, we could just like see this existing thing and then make a game about it.
That's right. Yes, that's another benefit about being at a big corporation is that you have those types of things available to you. I mean, you could have that as a startup too, right? I've worked at startups that have gotten some really large IPs, right, and licensed with really great, with just really great stories, really great worlds. But you have to do more hustle. Right? You really have to have someone who's really good at going and contacting the agents and the lawyers and the giant corporations that are involved in that. Working for a larger corporation means that you have to do less of that, and it's more of you just contact your own lawyers and they go handle it. And so it's a benefit. But at the same time, the benefit to being in a smaller company is that you have more flexibility over what you're doing. Right? Anytime we have ideas, it has to go up the chain and be approved. So sometimes that you just end up with more paperwork. You have more red tape, more waiting. Things move at a slower pace. Right? It's one of the common descriptors that I think is always great when you talk about a large team versus a small team movement. Right? Ability to be agile is that a small little startup team is like a little speedboat. And you can change directions and you can go other places and building things is super fast and speedy, but you don't want to take it out into a major swell on the middle of the ocean, right? Because it's more likely to capsize. At the same time, a large corporation is like a cruise ship. There's lots of space to hang out and it's really great and you've all these amenities, but if you want to change the direction of that cruise ship, it's going to take a long time, right? We have to let a whole bunch of people know. We have to slowly turn around. We have to make sure that all the people on the boat don't suddenly get seasick. I mean, it's just, it's a big, different situation. It takes more time. But at the same time, if there's really rocky seas, I'd rather be on that ship, right? So it's really just dependent on what your situation is and what works for the product that you're trying to put out, right? Sometimes if the product... Sometimes a smaller, quick team is better for the type of product you want to launch. If you're looking for something that's niche, if you're looking to build something that's super unique and might catch an audience that nobody's even considered before, that small startup might be the place, right? But if you're looking for something that's tried and true and is, has all this market research that says this is what you do, right, then that larger place, is the place for you. Huh?
I think you're good.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Thanks, guys.